to this week's Kids Church Mindful Moment. I hope this is an opportunity, if you can't connect with your community of faith, that you can use this tool to connect with God, with the stories of your faith, with each other, and with your own self. This week, we are exploring the story of somebody named Paul. We often talk about Jesus in our faith stories, but Paul actually plays a really big role too in our faith story. Paul lived after the time of Jesus. He was a Jewish man. He was working for the Roman government. He was taught to not agree with Jesus. And then one day he was walking along a road towards a place called Damascus, and he had a moment where he truly felt touched by God. And in that moment, it's like his whole world turned upside down, and he was able to see in a whole new way. What he realized in that moment was the wisdom of the teachings of Jesus, and how those teachings went against everything he had been taught about power and leadership and oppression and justice. In that moment, Paul, who up until then had been called Saul, turned into a new person and began to lead a very different life. I wonder, have you ever been absolutely certain about something only to find out that it's different than what you thought? What was it like when you discovered that something that you thought of in one way turned out to be something completely different? Was it easy to be convinced that what you thought was true was actually different? Did you fight it? Did you argue? Did you take it easily and accept that actually it was very different than what you had thought? I think we all have moments. Sometimes it's easier to accept that something is different than the way we think, and sometimes it's really hard to be convinced. In the story for Paul, it happens in a flash moment. He suddenly just understands in his heart that everything he believed was suddenly the opposite of what he believed. I imagine that would have been really hard. Maybe he would have argued with himself and tried to convince himself that it was different, that he was right the first time. What we know from the story, though, is he understood and saw truth and felt truth. And because of his own experience of having believed one thing and then learning it was different, he knew how important it was to share that new truth with others. Now, that story in itself is pretty cool, but Paul plays an even bigger part in our scriptures because Paul goes on to visit many, many cities and towns and communities, and in doing so spreads Jesus' message. And we know this through the letters that Paul writes. Letters about justice and fairness and relationships and communities, and most importantly, about what it means to love as God loves. And it is very much thanks to that moment of him accepting maybe he was wrong the first time. Maybe he could find a new truth. It was in that he created a legacy of letters and teaching that spread Jesus' ministry far beyond where Jesus had ever been, and continues to affect how we understand Jesus and how we understand God today. Sometimes it's okay to be wrong. It's what we do when we realize that maybe we were misinformed. That's really important. It's how we learn to accept that maybe we were wrong and there's a different truth out there. There are many instances in our life where we will see that what we thought was one thing is in fact another. And that doesn't make us bad people or weak people. What makes us strong is our ability to accept and to change and to help others also come with us, and to have compassion as well for when others don't see things the way that we do. So, for our mindful moment today, we want to explore a little bit about that idea of seeing something completely differently. Now, mindful moments can be all kinds of ways that we get in touch with ourselves and with God. Today, we're going to use art. Art can be a way of being mindful in that it invites us to get into the flow of something, to just completely lose ourselves in the process of creating something. And as we get into that process of creating, all of our other worries and other things that we're carrying can be put aside. We enter into this flow of creation, and in that flow we can find presence with God and the sacred and the divine. So we're going to create some art today for our mindful moment. Art that invites our eyes to look at things a little differently. We're going to create some 3D art, but it's not really 3D. It's an optical illusion. That means what we see looks different than what it actually is. So for this piece of art, you're going to need some paper. You're going to need a marker and a ruler. And lastly, you're going to need a simple shape to trace. I have got a cup, so I can trace a circle. Once we go through the process of how to do it with a nice simple shape, you can do any kind of shape you like and play with different shapes. But first, let's get into creating this first one with a simple circle. So here I have my piece of paper on a flat surface. I'm going to get my simple shape and put it in the middle of my page. And then I'm going to trace around that shape so that I have a circle on my piece of paper. There is my circle. Now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to put a line across the very top of the circle. And then I'm going to move my ruler down about 1 centimeter or maybe the width of a finger. And I'm going to do another line parallel, but it's not going to go through the circle. So let me show you. So the line is straight and parallel around the circle, but I'm not putting anything in the circle. I'm going to keep adding lines all the way down my page. Okay, so here we have an empty circle and a bunch of lines. Doing straight lines can be really challenging. Take your time, be patient, and if it's not perfect, that's okay. It will still work pretty well. So this still looks like a flat circle on a flat piece of paper with a bunch of lines. How do we make that 3D? Or how do we make it look as though it's 3D, as though it's popping out of the page? Well, here comes the part where we make it look as though this circle is popping from the page. We're going to add some curved lines across the circle that join the straight lines from one to the other. Here's what I mean. I'm going to start off at one of the straight lines, and then I'm going to make an arc, and then I'm going to come back down and join it to the straight line on the other side. Let's do that again for the next line. This time I'm following the first curve. Okay, that makes sense. I'm going to do that for the rest of the lines that come and join up with the circle. And there we go. That's
really all there is to it. Look at your circle now. Suddenly the circle almost looks like it's a ball that's popping out of the page, but it's still flat. From here, you can do all kinds of things to decorate it. Like this, you could color in every other line, and you can see the ball popping here. Or you could try a different shape. This one here has a heart, and I've added extra lines that put the lines closer together. What would it look like if you tried a different shape? Or play with the spacing of your lines and see how that changes the optical illusion. Here again is my popping heart. And look at that one, that's really good. It really looks like the ball is coming out of the page. I'm curious what shapes you might use. What if you traced your hand on a piece of paper? You could really get complicated. I wonder if you could do a face, or maybe a moon, or a star. Have some fun, play around, try different things. Always remember to be patient. It's difficult, it's challenging, and you will make mistakes, and those mistakes are okay. Use them as opportunities to improve or to try something different or to work with somebody else to make the task easier. And may this moment of art create some flow and some space to just be lost in the lines and the shapes, and to be amazed by how changing those lines can make things look different than what they actually are. My friends, may you have lots of time to get lost in the flow of art this week. And in that being lost in a project like that, may you feel the presence of God with you. Know that in all that we do it with God by our side and God within us. And may you go with a blessing into that state of creation and flow. May there be love in your heart to give. May there be joy in your heart to share. And may there be courage in your heart to lift others up. See ya!